Podcast, the podcast where we talk about new and exciting technologies, professional development, clean code, career advancement, and more. I'm John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Nash.
What do you think of when you hear that so and so company has a startup culture? Do you think about the things that are probably positive, like beer or ping pong, maybe beanbag chairs? Or do you think about the negative things, like 80-hour work weeks, a company offering you sweat equity for putting in those extra hours, maybe even being forced to sleep in the office, or crazy and unrealistic expectations?
I think of kind of a mixture of those things typically. I like any of these discussions, it kind of depends on what the context is. Is this a recruiter talking about a particular organization has a startup culture? Is this an organization declaring that they themselves have a startup culture? So what does it mean in what context?
Yeah, I mean, the three of us have all kind of worked for a startup before, and I mean things had their moments, but it wasn't sort of terribly chaotic. I think we were pretty successful at keeping sort of progress moving forward, but changes happening and et cetera.
Yeah, and certainly depending on the asks of the business or the asks of particular clients, it can be a little bit more chaotic at times, trying to make sure that we're delivering the value in a timely manner, in an effective manner, figuring out what the original ask is and figuring out if it's possible and how we can deliver that feature or piece of software.
Yeah, personally, I don't think that I have worked at a couple startups, but I don't feel like I have a huge amount of experience at startups that would make me think that they're really any different than any other company that I've worked at. I mean, I've worked at huge companies that had ping pong tables because they knew they sucked and they wanted to draw the developers in somehow. I've slept in the office, but not from working late hours, just because I was really tired. And I usually stay away from companies that have the long work weeks, or like, oh, hey, we'll give you equity in the company. That usually means that it's not the greatest place to work. But in my experience, those things aren't unique to startups. They're just things that happen at companies.
Yeah, I think I would kind of second that opinion. I feel like sort of like you were saying, John, when someone says, "Hey, this is a startup culture," or "We have startup culture," or "This is a startup," I kind of look at who's saying it and what are they trying to communicate with that. But the word startup or the idea of a startup, in many ways, in my mind, I think it's so cliche that I don't really have any real association to it, and I just try to sub in what I think that they're trying to convey. If it's a developer trying to warn me off and they're like, it's a startup company, and then they're probably trying to warn me about the hours of the chaos and the long work weeks, or if it's a recruiter or a company itself, they're trying to say, hey, we have a fun environment and we break things and but we do a lot of work, so but we try to have fun at the same time. So I don't know, that's sort of the way I kind of take it.
Yeah, and it seems like the industry is starting to mature a little bit. I still feel like the industry is relatively new, relatively young, and still going through a fair amount of growing pains and figuring out what it is people enjoy, figuring out what a good work environment is, what benefits people enjoy, and that type of thing. It's years ago, it was the Googles and the Facebooks saying that we want to make sure that everyone's in the office at all times. You're putting in 80 hours a week. We'll make sure you're fed. We'll bring in catering. We'll offer dry cleaning services and things like that. Facebook was notorious for early on saying their motto was move fast and break things. But I feel like too many companies try to emulate those same thoughts and ideals without truly understanding their purpose or their execution, and saying that we're going to move fast, we're going to throw out, all of our professional knowledge in working well and clean, and all of our past lessons learned, and we're going to just go 90 miles an hour, damn the torpedoes.
Yeah, I see that as kind of a sign of our immaturity as a profession. Uh, Nobody knows what works, and nobody knows why the things that are working. And so we are all too quick to jump onto a trend. Like, oh, what's agile? We should do that. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to get a 5-page book and we're going to do agile. Or, startups, they're the boss. They're doing everything these days. We need to be a startup. Like even corporations being like, well, we're trying to get that startup culture. Like, they're just trying to fix the fact that nothing they've done has worked. And I think the whole industry is doing that. It would be nice if we would stop jumping on the trend bandwagon and actually like learn from our mistakes, understand the thing that we're trying to achieve, and move forward from there. But it might be a little while yet before we're mature enough to do that.
I mean, to kind of a little bit come against that a little bit, isn't that kind of what they're trying to do though? Isn't the attempt to either maybe change the move to another new trend or whatever, an attempt to try to improve, to an attempt to try to say, okay, what are these things doing right? We need to make ourselves better, so we try to follow this trend so that we can get something right. I think I agree with you that the execution is poor most often.
Yeah, I think their heart is in the right place, right? Like they see a problem, they want to fix it, they want to be better. This other company has done really well. Let's imitate what they're doing, right? I mean, you see somebody being successful, you imitate them so that you too can be successful. The problem is that we're doing like that surface level imitation. Like you watch a movie and then you learn how to say the line from the movie the same way that the actor did. That doesn't make you a great actor, right? Because you don't understand all the process that goes into being a great actor. And it's the same thing that we do. We imitate what we see on the surface without understanding why the other company came to those decisions or why this practice matters. And so we end up doing it poorly.
Yeah, we read a blog post that's basically written at a third grade reading level, and then we assume that that's going to contain all of the information necessary to implement and understand the concepts that of why decisions were even made in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. There's not going to be that cure all. There's, like you both kind of alluded to. I think their heart is in the right place. Is we know we can do better. We've heard we can do better if we adopt agile processes and procedures. We know that we can do better if we adopt microservices. We know we can do better if we insert buzzword. But without truly understanding what it is those ideals help to solve, what problems those help to solve, and the execution it takes to be successful with those mindsets. I've heard about low code and no code movements. I've heard about all kinds of different processes and procedures that this is the new way to be successful. And I've been in those environments where we're moving 1,000 miles an hour. We don't have time to sit back and gather our thoughts and work cleanly. And when individuals bring up that we know how to fix this, we need to slow down, we need to plan better, we need to affect change, we need to work cleanly. I've even been told that some people just aren't cut out to be startup engineers as a result of trying to bring up those issues. I've been told that startups can't be run like that, even though those organizations aren't startups. And that also kind of is an attempt to negate my own personal experience of the startups I've been involved with have been successful by working slowly, by working cleanly, by getting the trust of their staff, getting the trust of their clients.
I mean, I've also been told that some people are only cut out to be greenfield engineers too. So,
Right.
you know.
Some people are definitely cut out to only be brownfield engineers. No, I think the key thing that in when like if you're in an actual startup, like it's not moving fast and breaking things. It's not whether you're agile or not. It's how quickly can you get your product to your customer so that your customer can tell you what you've done wrong so that you can fix it. So whatever process facilitates that, that's probably what you need to do. That may involve moving fast and breaking things. It may involve agile. It may involve DevOps, but it doesn't necessarily have to. And hopefully you don't find yourself sleeping under the desk.
So what I think is we kind of a little bit of we've talked about like sort of the immaturity of our field, but I think also the sort of where we are in our society and culture. We really value these sort of like sound bite phrases, right? And so you think of the words move fast and break things. You think of the words like low code, no code, right? Like, oh, we're going to code with no code, right? Like that just sounds like mind blown, right? And so, you know, the thing is we want to have something that sounds edgy, that sounds like we're doing something crazy. But I think the reality is the move fast and break things is really a motto that at the heart of things really is a great motto. It's just you have to break it down and understand what that move fast means. Move fast means move well and do the things that are going to allow you to move quickly, right? Break things means experiment and have a place in your workflows to be able to try out new things and to say, okay, this doesn't work, and make sure that your system and your systems, both workflows and applications, are resilient to changes. Right? Like that. That's really all that's saying. But if you just simply go, oh, well, we have to move fast, and that means whatever I define, get the fastest point to point A to point B. Okay, go and throw out everything that we think.
It does not mean move like the Tasmanian devil, leaving a disaster area in your wake.
Exactly.
Yeah. At face value, it's code with reckless abandon. But that may have been the impression that they wanted, but that's not what they were actually doing.
Bingo. Yes, that's correct. And that's because we had to like find some way to make it sound like you're doing something that you're not. In the same way that low code or no code, which no code really was the first movement, but because someone finally had to say, okay, well, actually there's coding involved. Okay, now we came up with the low code movement, right? And the reality is like there's still lots of coding and configuration and learning curve that's necessary for those things. You still have to learn the tooling. You still have to learn how to handle all these things. It's just, and they may work great for some particular applications, right? But we want it to sound like this sort of mind-blowing, I'm doing something that sounds impossible sort of thing. And that's what a society really values.
Yeah. Martin Fowler tweeted out a link and a discussion starter based on Elizabeth Hendrickson's blog post discussing momentum and urgency, where Martin said, lots of managers think that to get things done, you need to create a sense of urgency. Test Obsessed, which is Elizabeth Hendrickson's Twitter handle, says, Test Obsessed explains why it's more effective to create a sense of momentum. And on in the Twitter discussion, there's some discussion about momentum is greater than urgency, and also even momentum is equal to purpose. So helping teams be productive and feel that momentum, a way to help facilitate that is to give them a sense of purpose or explain the sense of purpose.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
I mean, it's age-old, knowledge that you need to move consistently and carefully if you want to get ahead.
Right. At the same time, I've seen that phrase be used to throw breaks right into the middle of something that someone's going to make a change that would actually improve the workflow and actually make things better, but it's different than what they've done before. And someone's like, no, that's much too fast. We need to take this to a committee, sort of like put it on the back burner. Let us think about it, because slow and steady wins the race. We just need to we'll think about that, and maybe in 17 months we'll actually come back to it and implement it. Right?
That's not really slow and steady though. That's like driving in first gear when you don't know how to use the clutch.
That's true, but I'm just saying, we have to be careful that we don't sort of throw out cliches that kind of get thrown into that other.
Which is kind of what a large portion of this talk is, or this conversation is about, I guess. you can't.
There are a number of cliches.
Yeah, you can't sum up the dev practices in half a sentence. Like it's a volume of information that needs to be considered. You can't just go, oh, but this guy said these 3 words, and that's what I'm going to base my entire life on.
Yeah, there's also a book that was released not too long ago by the Basecamp guys, Jason Fried, and DHH, entitled "It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work," where they have a lot of the sound bites crossed out on the cover: the 80-hour work weeks, the packed schedules, super busy, endless meetings, those types of things. Whereas on the back cover of the book, it says how to run a calm company: 8-hour days, 40-hour weeks, plenty of time to myself, comfortably paced days, no weekend work, rarely a meeting, no rushing. And I think that kind of sums up my ideal environment. Is I don't enjoy having other people's stresses imposed on me. I'm fine with a sense of urgency. I'm fine with momentum. I'm fine with meeting a deadline that is a true deadline, that we must get to market before our competitors, or we must get to market before a particular sales cycle, or whatever the case may be. We must start delivering value and start bringing in revenue. I understand that. What I don't enjoy is we made a mess, and as a result, we have to work nights and weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're having to put in overtime because it's impossible to get your work done because the code is in your way, that's a terrible thing. One of the sound bites, I guess you could say, that's kind of been ringing in my head the last several weeks is I think it's a Microsoft quote, but it's in either the Phoenix Project or the Unicorn Project, and I can't remember the quote exactly, but it's basically like the CEO of Microsoft told the employees, the developers, if you have to choose between delivering features and increasing developer productivity, choose to increase developer productivity, because they know that if the developers can move faster by moving well, that the features will happen faster. So increasing one increases the other, but increasing features only slows everything down, because then the emphasis is on getting it done as fast as possible, which makes you make a mess, which slows you down.
I think that's a scary thing for a lot of businesses out there. That idea of handing over. I think that's very scary for many businesses.
Yeah, the best organizations that I've worked for, or the ones that I've enjoyed the most, were the ones that strive to make an environment that they themselves wanted to work in. So whenever the owners of their organizations or the leaders within those organizations sat back and really thought about the environment that they themselves would want to work in and tried to make that environment a reality, that's where I'm most enjoyed working. The converse to that is the projects and the teams and the companies that I disliked the most were those that were more focused on features, and didn't leave time for the innovation. didn't leave time for the exploration, because at that point, all you're doing is driving towards the burnout that we discussed a couple of episodes ago.
Absolutely.
And you're not going to get the value that you could potentially get out of those professionals that you've employed.
It's okay because we could just hire new ones straight out of college.
Oh, well, you kind of end up having to, don't you? I mean, it's a very serious indicator for a company to pay attention to retention of developers and DevOps individuals, because if you're driving them into the ground and they're quitting, then it's not going to be long before the software at your company is going to stop working. And whether you think you're a software company or not, if you're hiring a developer, you're a software company, and without that software, your company will die.
Yeah, I think a lot of this really does kind of come down to like, how do we motivate people, and how do we get those motivations? And I think one of the things that you were bringing up earlier with Elizabeth's tweets, the question of momentum and urgency. I think when the urgency is a real thing and allowing that to be shown to the teams, I think it's sort of it's part of the purpose, right? Like, so urgency becomes a part of that purpose, because the urgency is being driven off of, hey, well, we have this product and we need to get it out there, or we need to get this completed, right? And so it's sort of like really giving more transparency and trust to the team to say, hey, this is where we are, and that gives them an ability to make momentum and to make build completion towards that goal, towards that whatever it is that they're working on. And what's damaging is when we try to create either false senses of momentum or false senses of urgency. So we're going to throw a deadline in front of you, even though it isn't really urgent on our part, but we're going to hold you to it. We're going to hold your feet to the fire because we feel like we need to like get the whips out in order to get work out of you. That just really just saps all of the goodwill and motivation that you're going to get out of people. You might be able to get work out of them if they are afraid of losing their jobs. Unfortunately, it's not very effective in this kind of economy because there's so many opportunities out there that if you're half a decent developer, there's probably going to be another place for you to go to.
But Ash, it's a well-known fact that developers just don't do work unless you hold their feet to the fire.
I mean, I know that that's a fact, but
and I would say even as an independent consultant and coming in and working with existing dev teams for a number of different clients, kind of integrating with the team and getting up to speed with their development practices, bringing in my own development practices and explaining how I feel effective and how we can deliver value quickly together as a team, as a cohesive team, really kind of goes a long way and gets that trust factor up relatively quickly. And once you start delivering the value and delivering on your promises and showing the people that are paying the bills, whether that's your own company or a client, and showing them that we can be effective if we do the types of things that we're asking for, that we're saying we want. We can deliver the value. We can commit to our promises and deliver on that. And Clayton, I'm reminded of the startup that you and I worked together first a number of years ago, when we were kind of figuring out on this new renewed startup how to assemble the team and how to be cohesive as a unit and how to learn and grow together, how to introduce test-driven development, how to introduce patterns and practices that maybe not everyone was familiar with, how to gain the trust of the business to figure out that we don't need death marches and endless sprints and nights and weekends, and figuring out that we can commit to the things that is being asked of us.
Yeah. I forgot about the Death March parts because we did a really good job of, I guess, teaching that business that it didn't have to be like that. Very shortly after I got there, we started test-driven development. We had like team lunches every day. It was a very cohesive team. There were some arguments, disagreements here and there, but for the most part, everything about that team was great. And the memories that I have of working there, and it definitely was a startup. I mean, a small company. We were recreating the software, reimagining it from scratch, not even looking at the previous stuff. All the memories I have are coming into work basically when I wanted to, being able to take longer lunches so that we could do training. If you had a problem, you just grab another developer, go into another room, sit at the whiteboard for a little while. Nobody really pressured us too much. We did have a deadline. We did have several deadlines, but we even got to sit with the business person and collect our stories together, form an estimate of when we thought we could get stuff done, and then tell the business person, yeah, we think we can hit that date. That shouldn't be a problem. We'll let you know if anything changes. And even in the larger companies I've worked for, that's extremely unusual. I mean, I don't think I've been at any other companies where we've been able to talk with the business like that. So I never really think of that company as, like your traditional startup, because it didn't feel like that. It was a completely different feeling. Like I wasn't sleeping at my desk. I wasn't none of that stuff. We had a ping pong table, I guess, but
one question I'll ask is, so you guys you're mentioning that you were kind of teaching this to the business and whatnot. So how did you get the buy-in from your team and that sort of thing? Was a team just automatically bought in, or
No,
what sort of approach did you take?
it was a little rocky at first. I was one of the relatively new developers on the team, third or fourth or maybe fifth hire. Clayton joined maybe a couple of months after that, and it was a rocky time for sure. That there was not a lot of specific direction and a lot of cohesiveness in the beginning, because there are a million things that we need to get done. Everybody just go. And without that unified vision, without that shared momentum or shared sense of urgency, without that singular purpose, we were often spinning our wheels, working in different directions, working on different features and different subsets of a bigger application. So it was a number of months to really sit down and figure out a better way to work. And that was a little bit rocky because we started with preaching of Agile and Scrum practices. But we as an industry, I think, have started to figure out that if you apply those labels in the wrong time or the wrong context, then there might be a little pushback against it. So if you can just kind of describe the end goal and the process with which we want to get there without maybe using those overutilized terms, then often the end result is a little bit better. So it was a number of months to get everybody on board, to see the value, to meet with the proper people, to pull out the requirements, figuring out the requirements are necessary for a system, figuring out that you can't actually write software without requirements. Scrum and Agile and processes like that, where they say we don't need requirements anymore, is really not a thing. There are requirements, whether you choose to discover them, capture them, write them or not. You must know what done looks like.
Okay, and then for sort of getting the business's trust, I'm going to guess that a lot of that was really found when you're able to sort of, again, give them those deadlines or help them work on creating those deadlines and then delivering on them. Is that the only thing, or was there other ways that you sort of were able to earn
There's
the business's trust?
yeah, there's definitely some give and take because a lot of times, and I just got an email or a LinkedIn notification that someone was looking for a developer to do a thing in this amount of time for this amount of dollars. And if you define something with within that box, there's really no wiggle room. There's nowhere to move. So figuring out that there's a discussion to be had. There's a finite amount of time, there's a finite amount of money, there's a finite amount of developer man hour resources. So figuring out what's possible in the timeline or figuring out how expensive something is to implement and having that conversation and it is a process. It is going to take time to develop that trust back and forth and coming to that agreement of what is feasible, what is possible.
Yeah, I think one of our big turnarounds at that company, as far as convincing the business that we were on the right track, we took, I think it was a half a day. We like took the second half of Friday, and we had art day, where we got some poster board and we got some string and we got some markers and we drew grids on the poster board and we taped the string to the board and we started tracking our metrics, our sprint metrics, with string on a board, on like a piece of poster board that we had taped to the wall. But when the business owner came for the retrospect or for the demo, she looked over and she was like, "What's that?" I was like, "Oh, that's our progress. That's how we're doing." And she got interested. And after a couple sprints, she could see that we were above the line. We drew a line from start of project or start of tracking to current number of story points that had been estimated. And we would bounce, above and below that line a little bit, but for the most part we were staying above the line. And so she loved seeing that we were going to hit our target because it was a points versus time chart. So we had like we have to finish by this date. So if we end up below this line, then we're not going to make it. But we had installed test-driven development. We had installed user stories and a couple other things, and so we were able to work through those without any real supervision, and very quickly put ourselves above the line and stay above the line. And I think the business person being able to see that gained us a lot of favor. And then from then on, we could say, well, we don't think we're going to make that, and we had the data to back it up. We could show her on our chart that we weren't going to make it, and she's like, okay, well, what if we cut out this feature or that feature? Whereas, in most companies, if you're like, which one of these features is the most important because we don't think we can deliver all of them? Well, they're all priority number one. They all got to get done. There's no wiggle room. But when you can show them, like, with no uncertainty that we just can't get it done, then they start going, oh, dang. Well, that one's not real important. We could remove that.
Right.
It was actually like an amazing thing because I haven't had it happen since. We've never been able to actually show the business people who are making the decisions, that kind of thing since that company. But I think that was like the big turnaround was just being able to display that data and have the business person be able to like actually see it.
Yeah, that's why I really enjoy information radiators and being able to show meaningful metrics and meaningful graphs and charts to people and explain to them what they're seeing and how this provides value to them, whether it's the health of our applications or the speed with which we're able to deliver features. All of that goes a long way with gaining trust from your coworkers, your business, your clients.
Yeah, and then you guys had mentioned that you had introduced TDD and patterns and practices and whatnot. So it sounds like you guys also had a huge focus from your team side on following good programming development techniques and disciplines, right, that allow you to reproduce the amount of work and continuously be sort of operating on a level that can be reproduced over and over and over and over again, with a very good, predictable result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At that company, even though, the business logic is different from thing to thing, we had a pretty nailed down process. We knew generally what it was going to take to get that next page done. And so we could estimate pretty good.
Yeah, if you can work cleanly and methodically, you can crank out some features pretty easily, as long as you understand the requirements or the ask that is being made. In my early years in my career, I went fast and made a mess, and it always ended up biting me in coming back and trying to maintain or add a feature or fix a bug. So I'm always advocating: slow down, work cleanly.
Agreed.
And with that, dear listener, we'd like to hear from you. What's been your experience?
If you like this episode, please like, rate, and review on iTunes.
Find show notes, blog posts, and more at sixfiguredev.com.
And be sure to follow us on Twitter at sixfiguredev.
This has been another episode of the Six Figure Developer Podcast, helping others reach their potential. I am John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Ash.